You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
I'm Stephen Cabral, and today on this Mindset and Motivation Monday, I'm going to try to bring you a show like I bring you every week, where I do my best to get you motivated to kind of tackle another week that's in front of you. Sometimes when you're coming off the weekend, it's a little bit more relaxed. You have to get back to work. You have to get back to your routine. Maybe that's bringing the kids to school or different activities, or for yourself getting back to work or school, whatever it might be. And sometimes we need that extra little push. Every single one of us needs that daily motivation to keep things going. And what I want to talk about today is sometimes it's easier than other weeks, right? Like sometimes we have more energy than other weeks. Sometimes things are going a lot better than other weeks. And sometimes we go from these amazing highs to these really low lows. And why is that? Well, the truth is this, that ever since literally the dawn of recorded time, they've talked about the ebb and flow of life, meaning like the Tao of life. And there's opposites to everything in life. And you can't even have anything in life without knowing its opposite. Meaning like there's no happiness without sadness. There's no love without hate. There's none. So you need those things to appreciate the other. However, I'll tell you this, and I'll be the first to admit, when you're in those low lows, you don't want to hear about how, that's just part of life and happiness is right around the corner. But what we do have to know is this. The truth of the matter is that the only constant in life is change. Change is the only constant. That means no matter how great things are in life, eventually we're going to experience another low, or we'll experience maybe more of like just a neutral time, right? It's not always high. And then at times when we're really low, we have to understand, and this is really important, it took me so long to get this, that the low is not going to stay low forever. And that's really, really important. Many years ago, maybe a decade ago now, I was listening to one of my favorite DVD, or I should say, I guess it was at that time, CD sets, and it was by Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn was a great philosopher, a great teacher, and he had a disc. I've talked about it before on the show, and I believe it's called The Art of Exceptional Living. I'll try to link it up again in the show notes. I'm not even sure if it's still available yet, but if you can get a copy of it, it's absolutely fantastic. And I used to resent, the only part of that 6 CD set was that I used to resent when Jim Rohn used to say, prepare for the bad times in life now. Meaning like, you can be going through good times, but expect bad times to come. And during that time in my life, I was really just focused on being positive, trying to change, some of my negative thinking, trying to rewire my mind. And obviously, I believe I needed to go through that. I needed to be that way in order to become who I am today. But I didn't want to hear about the negative side. I didn't want to hear about the negativity, and I certainly didn't want to hear about any more lows in my life. I had already experienced enough of those lows where I didn't need to hear about any more. So unfortunately, I didn't heed Jim Rohn's advice, and I would always just keep going along, not really appreciating the good life that I was enjoying and what I was trying to accomplish and what was going on really as part of this journey that we call life. And so what I want to tell you is this, that he talked about the seasons, right? He talked about where and I might, not do as great a job at him as explaining it, but I will do my best, that during the fall season, the autumn season, that's always when we would harvest, right? We would pull out the best of the times. We would pull out everything that we worked for. Winter times might be a low time. Spring is when we have to sow again. We have to plant those things. Summer is where we get to enjoy it. So when we look at the cycle of life, it's basically like, okay, you're planting good things now. And that's why great things don't always come right away in your life, because you have to do the work first. You need to put that seed in the ground. And then after that, it starts to grow. Summertime, you're continuing to water. In the autumn, the fall is when we we harvest, we pull all of the great crops that we've grown, all of the goals that we've achieved out, and then winter might be another lull time. That's when we have to then reassess. We have to look back and we have to change. That's the big thing, is we're not static beings. We can't just stay where we are. We age, we progress, we go from one job to another. We have families, we have spouses, all of these different things, and we can't just remain the same person. And when you try to remain the same person, that's a big part of the struggle, right? Because you can't just stay the same in life. You're going to get left behind, and with that comes a lot of anxiety, a lot of regret, and a lot of depression. So my big thing is this, is I eventually understood that I was starting to live a better and better life, that I was starting to feel better physically, but also mentally be less stressed, have less anxiety, be less negative, and not feel like I was going to be sick for the rest of my life. But I'll tell you this, and I felt fantastic for many years now, and I can honestly say every year I feel better and better. And I think a big part of that is looking at my labs and optimizing my hormones, my gut function, looking at food sensitivities, doing all of those things. And of course, I do my detoxes as well every few months. And all that helps, don't get me wrong. And again, I feel better and better every year. But I can tell you, just about 4 weeks ago, I came down with one of the worst cases of what felt like I had, again, chronic fatigue-based syndrome from when I had it before, which was the full body flu-like pain. Every joint hurts. You just feel completely worn down. You can't even think anymore. And barely use your brain. You don't even want to talk because it takes energy. You don't have an actual fever, but it feels like you do because you have these cold sweats. And it's really tough to get out of bed. Now, this wasn't the flu, meaning like I didn't actually have the flu. I have what a lot of people understand to be what feels like Epstein-Barr virus, what feels like mono, which feels like chronic fatigue. And it's this just high-level inflammation that turns on the Th2 branch of the immune system and a few other things that really aren't necessary to know what they are. But when I was going through that, I knew that I had gone through this before many, many times. And even as I relapsed and was getting better and better, I knew that it wasn't going to be long before I felt well again. So as I felt absolutely terrible during those days, and again, I have 2 young daughters, still having to be a father, still having to be a husband, still having to work, still having to do all of those things, I just pushed through because I understood that it wasn't going to last. And believe it or not, just 48 hours later, I felt completely well again. Now, I had to do all of those things. I had to basically give my body rest. No exercise during that time, no extra work, trying to get to bed a little earlier, eating my low anti-inflammatory foods, my detox-based foods, and then understanding why this might have come on. Was I overdoing my exercise a little bit? Was I overdoing my work? Was I not getting enough sleep? Was I eating more cheat foods than I should be doing? And it wasn't any one thing, but it was a combination of all of those things. And I realized that for wherever it was in my body at that time, it was too much. And my body told me that. It responded with a massive amount of inflammation. And that inflammation came out as the symptoms of all of these flu-like based symptoms. But again, having been there before and knowing that it couldn't last forever, even if it lasted 3 weeks or 4 weeks, I knew that I would eventually return to health because I knew what I had to do to get back there. And so that's what I want to share with you today, is that no matter where you are right now, I can tell you this, the only people who don't overcome their struggle with what they're dealing with right now, and of course, there are certain exceptions, right? There are really debilitating based diseases out there. We're talking about pancreatic cancer and some of the more virulent ones. And yes, you should absolutely fight, and you can overcome those as well. But for the majority of people, the 99.9% of people who are dealing with autoimmune-based disease, with brain fog, with psoriasis, with Hashimoto's, with all of those types of things, all of those things can and will be overcome as long as you don't give up, and as long as you don't become a victim to that disease, that you don't take on that role of the victim, and that you don't identify with the disease, which I'm going to speak about next week. So please do tune into that Motivation Monday podcast. So you cannot just give up, right? You cannot identify with whatever that dis-ease is. You must push forward. You must understand that at one time in your life, you weren't dealing with this, and yes, you can overcome it again. So I'll tell you this, that the absolute most important thing is that you just don't give up. And you understand that no, every day will not be perfect. And every day is not supposed to be perfect, and that's okay. That's what I realize now. And I'm hoping that if you're not already there, that you start to understand that as well. Because if you understand that not every day is going to be perfect, you're okay with it when it occurs. Meaning, like, if you already know that you're going to have some really poor days, and you might even have one of those a week, that if you know ahead of time, it's much easier to deal with, because you can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to get through today. I'm going to just try to go to bed early. I'm going to call it a day, which is often what I say. I'm going to call it a day. I'm going to wake up tomorrow, and tomorrow is going to be a new day. All right? And you're going to deal with that new day with a new, fresh mindset, because yesterday is now gone. The only way that yesterday continues to live on is if you keep rehashing what happened on that day. It's time to move forward with whatever went on yesterday, last week, last month, or last year. It's time to push past that. And if you don't know how, my number one recommendation is to start with what you can do. Start to change your nutrition. Start to do a detoxification that eliminates certain inflammatory foods, because maybe you can't run a food sensitivity test. Maybe you can't run an organic acids test to look at your gut. But what you can do is start to eliminate the most inflammatory foods, and you can start to level out your blood sugar levels. That's going to help both your body and brain. And then after that, if you're not already feeling better, because a lot of people do, the majority of people do feel better after they've gone through something like the Dr. Well detox or a detoxification or an elimination-based diet. And then after that, if you still need it, then maybe you'll start to seek out a coach, or you'll start to get more in depth in your reading. You start to look at things like that. But all you have to do is push forward. All you have to do is take one more step forward today than you did yesterday. And if you do that, you really can't fail. You can't, because you're moving forward. You're eventually going to find out what you need to do that works for you, that works for your body, that works for your mind. And the other tip I'll give you is that when those low points come, just do your best to breathe through it. And what does that mean? Is every time you take a deep breath in through your nose and a longer breath out through your mouth, and you take it in through the belly, the diaphragmatic breathing, you're calming the central nervous system. You're calming the fight or flight. If you learn to do that, which I'll talk about in future episodes as well, you can calm your response to stress in that moment. And if you can calm yourself in response to stress in that moment, and you continue to do that, well, all we live in are those moments. You're going to understand, too, that this moment is not going to last. So I'll tell you this, that when you're in those lows, keep telling yourself it's not going to last. It's not going to last. You're going to achieve your goals. You're going to push past. But also, when you do then eventually get to those highs, appreciate them, be grateful for them, enjoy them. Don't worry about how long they're going to last. We don't know, right? The only constant is change in life, but appreciate the highs, really enjoy them. And again, nobody's perfect. I'm not myself, but what I can do is try to pass on a lot of what I've learned to you, and hopefully you can begin to implement that in your own life. Thank you again for tuning into the Cabral Concept. And as always, if this show or any show could help anyone you know, anyone you care about, please do feel free to pass it on to them. Thank you again. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stephencabral.com/resources.